This morning, I'm going to give you just a little bit of an overview of what to expect for the day. Good morning. My name's Ariane Gonzalez. I'm with Cervantes Food Products. That's my family business. We manufacture traditional classic New Mexico chili sauces and salsas. And welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to see so many faces. I appreciate everybody being here. Today will be an opportunity to learn just amazing things. We have a great lineup of individuals for today. Our featured today is our 11th year of doing a symposium. And we ask ourselves with this symposium, what's your legacy and the transition that goes along with that? I want to thank everyone again for joining us today, and I especially want to thank our sponsors, as well as our distinguished guest speaker, as well as all of you who are representing family businesses, the Parker Center Family Business Board of Directors, and our executive director, our volunteers, everybody. We all had a hand in this, lots of hours of putting it all together. Without the generosity of our sponsors, and the energy and the funding, Parker Center would not be able to continue to fulfill our mission of providing family businesses with opportunity to address our unique needs and with outstanding programming to help us succeed and grow for generations to come. At the registration desk, you all received a beautiful red bag with lots of goodies in it. There are a number of things in our bags. We have membership information. We have, for those accountants in the audience, we have CPE credit sign-up sheet. But more importantly, we have some yummy, delicious snacks. We have popcorn, beef jerky from the Beef Council. We have tortillas from Bueno Foods, and we have Cervantes salsa. I think we've represented the entire food group for today, so enjoy the snacks. This morning, I'd like to just take a second. We're going to kick off our program, and I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Dimitri Kaplianis. I told him I'd practice that. I did a little bit of that. Dr. Kaplianis will be joining us. He's the Associate Dean for Enrollment Management and Associate Professor of Marketing at UNM Anderson. Dr. Kaplianis will give us some opening remarks on behalf of Anderson School of Management. If you'd like to join me, Dr. Kaplianis, I'd love that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariane. And good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you to the 11th Parker Family Business Symposium and to represent the Anderson School of Management at this event. So if you're thinking, Professor of Marketing and Family Business, what credentials do I have to speak about family business? Let me give you a little bit of backstory and history about me. The name Dimitri Kaplianis and the accent normally cause people some confusion. If you're listening to my accent, you've probably figured out by now that I wasn't born in New Mexico. I was not even born in the United States. I was born in South Africa, but the name is not a South African name, it's a Greek name. My father grew up in a small village in Greece, and the custom in this village was that none of the sons were permitted to get married until all the daughters were married. And my aunt showed every inclination that she was going to go through life as a spinster. So in the dark of night, my father ran away to South Africa. And when you run away from home, you normally can't take a whole lot of stuff with you. So he started his new life in his new country very poor, worked very hard, started a small business, one business became two, and I spent my entire childhood growing up in that business. I knew all the things that my parents worried about cash flow, worried about making payroll. I learned the value of work ethic. Look for work, don't get told what work to do, go and find work to do. Take responsibility. Leave the world a better place than you found it. And one sad day came, and I had to tell my dad, Dad, this isn't for me. This is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to become a professor. So there went my father, or at least one element of my father's succession planning. I came to the States I met my wife in the States. We've lived in New Mexico for 8 years, and we have 2 young boys. And it was important to me to try and instill in them the same values that my father instilled in me through the family business. So we have a very small business. It's called Rockstar Chickens. It's a small poultry business, really small. Our workforce consists of 10 chickens. And the main thing that you need to know about Rockstar Chickens is, although it's cash flow positive, it's not profitable. It's actually a very, very complicated mechanism to transfer money from my pocket into my son's pockets via your pocket. But it's not really about the money. It's about values, work ethic, and leaving the world a better place than you found it, which is why I think many of you are here today. Family business is the hub of the New Mexican economy. It's the single most important element of the New Mexican economy. Anderson, as a business school, would not be here if it wasn't for family businesses. So I am delighted that we have this partnership with the Family Parker Business Center. It is my hope and Dean Sean Berman's hope that it is a long, fruitful, and productive partnership, and Anderson is just absolutely delighted to be associated with the Parker Family Business Center. So thank you so much all for attending, and enjoy the event today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaplianis. We really appreciate it. And I think we can all relate to perhaps cash flow positive, maybe profitable, but trying to get it into other family members' pockets. Yes, I definitely can relate to that. I'd like to just also take a minute, and I apologize. The popcorn, by the way, is from Buffett's Candies. I don't know about you folks, but my Easter Bunny's been shopping at Buffett's for over 30 years. And if I don't make it to, if the Easter Bunny doesn't make it to Buffett's, we have very angry adults in our family who are expecting Buffett's candies. I'd like to take a minute also to introduce Jim Parker. Jim Parker is our fearless leader. He is going to, in turn, introduce us to our distinguished speaker this morning, Dr. Denis Jaffe. And for those of you who don't know Jim, Jim has been the backbone, along with his wife Linda, of the Parker Center for Family Business. In 2005, he started as a founding member, along with a couple of other folks, and created the New Mexico Business Family Alliance. Well, fast forward, and it's amazing, in 2014, Jim and Linda approached Anderson and agreed to fund Anderson School of Management so that we could become affiliated with the Anderson School of Management, and we're very proud of that. That happened in 2015. So Jim, over 30 years of experience giving legal advice and counseling to family businesses on federal taxation, estate planning, employee benefits, health care law, and our fearless leader, Mr. Jim Parker.
Thank you, Ariane. I'd like to add my welcome to all of you for attending the symposium today. I think it's going to be a very exciting program, and I hope you will enjoy it. I have the privilege of introducing our featured speaker this morning. For over 40 years, Denis Jaffe has been a consultant to family business. As both an organizational consultant and a clinical psychologist, he has helped multi-generational businesses develop their governance policies and transition from one generation to the next to ensure the ongoing success of the business and the family. For 35 years, Dr. Jaffe was professor of organizational systems and psychology at Saybrook University in San Francisco, where he is now professor emeritus. He received his BA in philosophy, his MA in management, PhD in sociology, all from that little school on the East Coast, Yale University. I think you may be familiar with Yale. As an author, his books have guided family businesses in working together to build their business. A couple of his noted books are Working with the Ones You Love, A Strategy for Successful Family Business, and stewardship in your family enterprise, developing responsible family leadership across the generations. At this point, I want to turn the program over to Dr. Jaffe. Thank you.
The challenge is people come and they hear a speaker, and in management we have a thing called the knowing-doing gap. And, how many people have the experience of having a wonderful experience? You learn a lot, you say, wow, this is really great, and then a couple of weeks later, nothing happens. That's the knowing-doing gap. And that's the biggest problem that we have in family enterprises, is we have people walking around that are full of knowledge, and they've heard stories and they know all these wise things to do, but somehow the pressures come up and they don't get around to doing them. So my goal for today is to give you some useful knowledge about teams that you actually can do something with. Now I know that there are family members from older generations, younger generations, and advisors in the room, and my sense is that each of these groups of people can have something that they can take out. So I'm going to kind of have the dialogues designed so that they apply both to advisors and family members, and I hope that you'll come out around lunchtime with some practical things and just be raring to go home and try them out. So we're going to do three things this morning. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about just kind of why it's so hard to create a family team. And a lot of people, when I say family teams, someone will kind of look aside and say, well, that's an oxymoron, a self-canceling phrase. It's like family and teams, no way they're connected. Well, it isn't easy, but as we'll hear when we hear from some families later today, it's possible. And in fact, the families that are successful into their second and third generation have to grapple with that, have to grapple with the idea that even though a family business may be started by a wonderful individual person, who therefore is not by definition an expert on teamwork, to move into the second generation, there has to be some sort of a family team. So I'll talk a little bit. Then the second part, before we have a break, there's going to be dialogues at tables, and I'm going to rearrange the table. So I'm warning you in advance, you're going to be moving. So just be aware of that. And then after the break, we'll be looking at exactly what makes up a good team and how do you create a family team. And we'll end with another dialogue where you'll be doing some thinking and reflecting on how exactly in the work that you do you can help create family teams. So just a little bit about me, which is that one fact that I like to share, because I'm proud of it, is that I know that without a doubt I am the only business professor, now actually former business professor, who has written not one but two books, business books, with the word love in the title. Now, what does love have to do with business? Well, that's the essence of the family business. The family business is not just about making money. It's people that care about each other, and also, as a family, they care about certain things that they stand for. And so in family business, we're dealing with a kind of a business where it isn't just about the business. It's also about how we do the business and how we are together. And that's the challenge, but also the opportunity. And I love to see how large family businesses can activate their values and the way they do things in kind of an incredible scale. So let's get everybody into the mood. And I see we've got one person here who's some people that are all on a table, so maybe you can kind of join another table to get some company if you are willing. And you're welcome at any table. So I'd like you to think about a time in your life when you experienced a wonderful working team. When you were part of the team, and I want you, to share at table some of the things about that experience, just a little bit, because there's a couple of people at the table. Share a little bit about the experience, and then try to come up with something that triggered or made that was really the essence that made that team experience able to happen. So let's have about 10 minutes of conversation at tables. Share your team story, and each table, I'm going to go around, I have a microphone here, to share something that they've learned. Let me have your attention. In 2 minutes, I'm going to go around with my trusty microphone and ask each table to share one trigger of what makes for a really great team experience. So finish up, but I'm going to ask each table to share one insight, and we'll show a little bit about crowd learning, about how crowds create wisdom.
I agree with you in a way.
Okay. Okay, let me call everybody together. There'll be more times to talk, and as you get to know each other, you'll have conversations for lunch and into the afternoon. So let's go around the room, and I'm going to ask each table to share one insight about triggering a great team. Here you go. Say who you are.
Lester Price. Good morning. Team building, and in fact, in visiting with Danny and John, I use the words, what we can do in the collective is far greater than any of us could dream of individually. And establishing that culture within the foundation that next generation does have that voice, and unlike in our conversation here, that I won't suck all the air out of the room.
What was really, I think, fun about this discussion is the fact that fourth generation got involved and saw the need for creating a foundation that brought the family with varying views and opinions about their worldview, brought them all together, and they're all kind of in that collective trying to work together to come up with some accomplishing the mission of the foundation. What a great idea.
That's great. So the fourth generation, everything isn't done for them. There's a lot for them to do, and they need to get together and build a team. They can't just inherit it by breathing the air of the family. So who's your spokesperson? Say who you are.
I'm Betsy Carlson, and I'm on the board. I'm the spokesperson just because I talk the most, I think. At any rate, so I've been having this great conversation with us, first and second generation of a business, and one of the pearls of knowledge is that when the older generation gets to a point where they can step back a little bit and empower the people coming up to make good decisions and maybe not step on one another's toes, having roles and responsibilities that allow that not silo, but allow that autonomy in the younger generation making decisions and running the business. It is the best way to build that team.
Great. So differentiation and having different roles, so you're not all clumped together. Everybody has to do something different to contribute to the team. So there's differentiation. Who's your...
Thank you.
Introduce yourself and
Okay.
share your wisdom.
I don't have any wisdom
Exactly,
but my name is Jeff Myers. I'm on the board as well. And I grew up in a family business, but did not end up going into it, nor did either of my brothers. We all had professions and went different directions. So with that in mind, I have a family, both myself and my wife, Vicki Wilcox, who will speak later today, are attorneys, and our oldest kid all through growing up said, there's no way I want to be an attorney. Both my parents are attorneys, it'll be awful. Naturally, she's now in law school, and she worked for my law firm this past summer, between the first and second years. So I think the wisdom I have, if any, is sometimes your kids will learn through osmosis things that they don't realize they're learning, and it may work out well for them if you're good role models, I guess.
Good. Well, I could take two things out of that. One is that be aware that your kids are always watching, and whatever you think you're saying, they're seeing a lot more. And the second is don't prejudge. Don't say, well, he's a this and she's a that, because you never know. So wisdom is pouring out. Who's the spokesperson? There you go.
I did not volunteer.
Volunteer. Yeah.
Voluntold.
Go ahead.
My name is Cindy Davis, and we had a pretty good discussion here too. And I think we kind of, to answer the specific question, what does it take to make a good team? You all have to kind of be headed towards the same goal and agree on the goal.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I can add just a taste.
Yeah. Okay. Who are you?
Franklin Wilson. And in addition to having that common long-term goal right now today, know that next generation can change that goal. They can modify that goal. They're going to have their own vision to take it a different direction, and be willing
Right.
to accept that.
Well, that's important. So you have a wonderful vision for your generation, and it really works, and everything's perfect. Why don't we just give it to the next generation and have them just do exactly as we do? Well, that's not the way it works.
I think the new generation needs to create more than what we have done.
If
That's mainly what our discussion is.
if they're living your vision, they're not living, and they haven't.
What we've done
They can respect it.
and grow from there.
Yeah. So again, this is how we understand and see what needs to happen in the family. So who's your spokesperson?
Yeah, I'm Thomas Lantieri, and we came up with a kind of a comprehensive list of what makes a good team. So some of the things we came up with is good collaboration, very good communication, a clear and shared vision for the company, and an environment that's supportive, caring, and acknowledges people, and also an ability to jump in and switch roles when necessary. So those are some of them.
Great. So there are a lot of special challenges that come up in a family that if you bring a group together that have all these capabilities and say form a team that you don't have, and that's one of the challenges that we're going to talk about in a family team rather than a special brought together team. This group.
Hi, my name's Lydia May. What we discussed about is similar to everybody else here. There's common goals, flexibility, and communication, and willingness to work across the board to help each other accomplish the goal of the day, and of course the goal of the company, but come together and say, what do we got to get done today? How are we going to do it? And what's the best way to do it? And then go. And that is something I learned not working in a family business.
But it definitely applies. Yeah. Great. This group. Here you go.
Hi, Kayla Kersey. We talked a lot about vision and communication, and then you guys stole our idea. So we went, dang it. But the other thing I think we talked about was bringing different people to the table, and how important it is to have the different types of personalities. I think sometimes in a family business, we are raised very similar, and so it is important to get all members of the family engaged and to learn about how other people work and what that looks like and how you can empower the people around you, which I think is what Dale's really good at, to bring their best to the table.
So there may be a leader of a team, but every member has a special role, and they need to affirm that. There are no bystanders on a good team. Who's up?
Mary Lou Dobbs. All the things that you said are important, but one of the things we came up with, I think Bill in particular, was when there's conflict and people aren't coming together, that one of the things you may want to do is have a clean environment, have food presented so people can eat together and share before you get into the difficulties of what's going on. Just some common courtesies to make the environment a better place to be before you deal with the issues. And also having some fun and not all be stressful. So those are kind of the different things that we came up with. Thank you.
Great. Well, that's new. Again, the team has to operate in a place, and having a place that speaks to them about being a team, being centered, being calm, and doing some things to have fun and to bond are really critical to success. So we get to the end. The question is, are there new things? What is each group going to say? But it's working fine. So who's your spokesperson? Here you go. Great. Who are you?
I don't want to fall.
No.
I'm Andres Casas, and we have a pretty good discussion. I mean, since we're almost the last table, I think everybody has said it at this point. But the main thing we came up with was definitely having the same goals and objectives.
Mm-hmm.
If you start everybody having different goals, you're just never gonna get to the point where you want to be. I am the child that did not want to join the family business, so I do get to see the point. I do have a brother who's in the family business, and I think one of the big qualities is understanding the generations now. We know the business might have started 20, 30 years ago, and now the new generations are coming in to buy the products from the existing company. We might need to listen to the new ideas. And like somebody else said, we gotta actually communicate with each other so we have the same goals and objectives. And the last little thing was trust. I know you might not like each other sometimes, but at the end you gotta trust each other.
Great. And trust is complicated because people talk about how trust it's easy to lose. You can lose it in a second, but it takes a long time to build up. And every time you lose it, the next hill is higher. So trust is a nice word, but when you kind of take it apart and say what is trust and how do you build it, it's a whole lot of stuff. And here we have our last table. Do you have?
Thank you. I'm Brett Newberry. We had a really good discussion about several issues. I just want to throw out a couple of things real quick. Communication obviously is extremely important. Honesty, checking your ego at the door so you don't have any ego going through trying to build these family teams. But the main discussion we had, and I was really excited about what you had to say about what they went through and through her company, is taking the time, because I know we deal with this a lot with clients, taking the time to define your internal processes on how you do business. And by taking that time, you end up having additional costs on the front end, but in the long run, it helps you set boundaries, accountability, and I think ultimately, from what I've experienced, is it cuts down on overhead costs and makes it a better working environment.
Great. Well, hold all these ideas, because after the break, we're going to come and talk about what makes up a family team, and pretty much all the things that we're going to talk about are things that have come up. So again, it's easy to say all the things that have to be in a good team. The challenge is to create it. So the first thing that I want to talk about in some depth is why is it hard to create a family team? And a family team grows up, and they're kind of thrown together. The family evolves, but they don't really grow up with the idea of being a team. I mean, you've got two brothers. I've got three sons, and it's like if they've grown up trying to kill each other. And I can't imagine if I had a family business what I would say to kind of turn that around. But if you're you want to run a business, that's the challenge. So I'm going to, and in your book, I think tab 1 has my notes. I'm not showing PowerPoints, but I'm going to go through the notes over the next couple of minutes. So the challenge is, there are two big challenges. And the first one is the fact that you grow up in a family environment that has certain qualities and a certain way of operating that's very different from what you want in a good business team. And so I think the first insight in learning to create a family team, and this is something that other teams don't have to deal with, is you have to kind of understand the family's history and really prepare people to create a team. And in some ways, a team, when it's working in a family, is wonderful and natural, and in other ways, it really is unnatural, and there's a lot of learning and unlearning that family members have to make, and some of it you can't start when everybody is grown up and working in the business. You've got to set some markers in the ground before that. So family members have dual roles. They're family members and they're also working together. And if your father, older brother, older sister, younger brother, whatever it is, those family roles and those things are, let's just say, stronger than the fact that you're in a working relationship. So one of the first articles that was written on family business was about the confused hierarchy and how in a family business team, if it went against the family hierarchy, there was trouble. So if the oldest son takes over, well, that's kind of natural in the family, and the oldest son can kind of have credibility. But what if you have the leader is the youngest daughter or youngest son, and there are 3 older siblings? How can the youngest really have the credibility to do it? So you've got to deal with the family hierarchy and the family roles. And also, when you are working together, it is not the same as being a brother and sister. And if you are a brother and you're used to telling your sister to shut up, or you're used to arguing, and you're in a business situation, that isn't maybe the best relationship. So that's number one, is we need to relearn and rethink the family roles, and you don't do it by legislating and saying, okay, we're now going to think business. You can't come in after 20 years of arguing and beating up on each other and say, okay, now we're a team. It is a real learning process. So the dual roles, and the second thing we're going to look at is the style of the business leader makes it hard to create teams. And sometimes the initiative for the family team, and some people, this is a surprise, the initiative really comes from the younger generation rather than the older generation. The people that say we need to build a team, we need to do all these things. It isn't that the older generation is against this, it's that the older generation doesn't understand it because in some ways they've never been part of a collaborative team of equals. So those are the two challenges. So let's look at the family hierarchy. Family hierarchy is what is the soup that family members grow up in. So one of the tools that in the family business field that we use to understand families is to kind of write down the family tree. And when you're an advisor, you want to do this when the family gets together, and you write the family tree and you say, so who are the grandparents? Who are the older generation? What are their values? How do they grow up? And one of the interesting conversations in a family is for the older generation, parents, to talk about their parents and how they grew up. So you talk about the family relationships and how that imprints you. And one of the challenges in forming a family team is that family members have to recognize and begin to say, what are we going to do to shift from some of the reflexes we have as a family. So the family hierarchy is basically the pecking order in the family. Who's older, who's younger, who's male, who's female, what are the roles, what are the expectations. And the first thing about a family team is there are natural differences. And family members treat each family member differently. And for example, in my family, one day, to my great surprise, because this is the work I do, my middle son took me, my older son took me aside and said, "Dad, you have to understand something," and it's really hard for me to say, but actually my younger brother always gets a better deal than me. And I was shocked. I mean, I'm Mr. Family. It's like, how could this happen? And it turned out we talked it through, and here's the way it is. So when my first son was born, I was a poor, struggling graduate student. He lived in a little apartment, and he went to a public school. 5 years later, another son. We were being successful. We were we had a house, not an apartment, and we were setting up a consulting firm, and we were making more money. So the opportunities for the second son, different than the first son. I never thought that was a big deal because it was in my life. But he's growing up and he's seeing, my brother gets this, my brother gets that. A lot of families learn on their first kid, and they're really strict, and then they try. Secondly, so there's a different world between the kids. And if you're a parent, let me tell you, you think you know, but you are always surprised. And you won't be surprised, of course, if you never listen. But if you listen, you'll hear. You can say you treat everybody the same, but they're different. And you have to understand that the differences are what's real, not your intention to be a good guy. And a lot of parents confuse their intentions with their effects. They intend well. Every parent intends well, but things happen. And you have to understand that the effect may not be what you intend, and you have to listen to it, even if it's distasteful. Sometimes in a family there's a competition for attention. There's a competition for resources, what you get, the pie, who gets the bigger piece, and this thing about cutting the pie, and is it exactly right, or is there a little bit more? And so family, that competition is a thing that comes in a family, and it's fun and great and cute when kids are young, but what happens when it comes later? So you have a situation, for example, that I work with a family where the older sister was very thoughtful and studious and worked very hard, and the younger brother was a kind of a wild man, raced cars, did all these great things, and somehow, and again, children pick up messages. The older daughter didn't pick up a message, just picked up a message. You got to be very competent. You got to help the family. You got to do what you can do. And she went into the family business and was very competent, and pretty soon was running it. The younger brother got the idea that as the boy, he was going to work in the business, and father agreed with him, and somehow he got the idea that it would be all equal and that he would be a partner. He was in the business. He wasn't really very competent. What he liked to do was race cars, and this was a food company, and so they would sponsor events, and he'd be off in the event. And he really didn't do very much, and in the end, the business was owned 50-50 by he and his sister. And the father said, well, the sister is going to be the CEO. His response to that is that he was furious. How can you do that? And then this is where the family roles get confused. So he immediately did what a good family member does when you grow up in a family business. What did he do when the father said, well, your sister's going to be the CEO? It's easy to get. So what did the son do? What? What?
Threatened to quit?
He did that, yeah. No, actually he didn't. Who did he go to? Let's make it, right. Wait a minute. Does mom work in the business? No. Why does he go to mom? Because the son gets a better deal. So this is the way it goes in families. And so the daughter asked the father, well, you're naming me CEO. Do I have the authority? Yes, you have the authority. Okay, and what's her first act? Fire the son. This is an example of how you don't build teamwork. Now, they had no discussions in the family. The father, was not a communicator, as are a lot, and nothing happened. So the daughter is in her world of competence and capability and do what's right and make the parents proud, and the son is in his reality. And it was really hard. So we tried to do a buyout for the son. So the son was, and of course he, as a good family, business, heir, he threatened to not bring his grandkids over to the parents' house, all kinds of things. And he also tried to negotiate a separate deal with his father, where the father would pay for his racing team and allow him. So things went downhill. We created a buyout where he would get, now he's 30 years old, he would get millions of dollars, a check for millions of dollars after tax, and he could do anything he wanted. And so we presented him with the deal, and his reaction, again, he's living in the family reality. His reaction was, wait a minute, because there's a discount and because I won't get the full value of my shares, even though I'm getting umpteen $million, this will make my sister richer. And that was all he could think about, is this would make his sister richer. So he turned down the deal. Again, this is the kind of, so you're dealing with the family hierarchy. And it's a challenge, and the family hierarchy is a cauldron of things, and if you want to build a family team, you have to let some of that come up. In addition, the family members have to learn to operate differently. So if you are a family member and you're used to kind of dealing with your mother and father, and you're working in a business, you have to understand that working in a business, you don't complain about what your family members do and go home and complain to your mother or make this an issue in the family. Now, that's easy to say. This is one of the things, everybody says these things, great. But what do you do? How do you deal with it? So in working with families, for example, one of the things that a number of consultants do is you get a little hat. And the hat has one side that says family and the other side that says business. And when you're arguing, you say, well, now, are you arguing as brother and sister or as father and son, or are you arguing as business partners? And then they start arguing and say, we're business partners, and you listen to the argument and say, doesn't sound like business thing. Who's the CEO of this business? Dad. And if you are in business and your boss who owns the company says, don't do this, what is the role of the subordinate? Learning roles, learning things, there's a lot of unlearning to do in creating a family team. So you have to face it and talk about it in the family. The challenge is to talk about the differences, to talk about what makes it hard to be a team, and begin to work together. The challenge of creating a family team is that the issues in the family get transferred into the business. And as in the example of the son that I said, you cannot deal with them on the level of as business issues. You have to look at it. So if two sons are competing for dad's attention, and dad is very tricky and talks to each one of them and eggs them on, and then dad says, I'm going to see which one of you is the better person to run this business, what are you going to have? You're going to have we have all these, since the Bible is full of brothers fighting each other and younger brothers and older brothers. Read it. Read Genesis. It's incredible family business stories, and it's pretty depressing. So the challenge is rivalry is there, and what do you do about it? And there's a couple of things that families do, and one of them is called a triangle. And that what happens, and this is the calling mother is part of a triangle, is the people that have a disagreement, there's a lot of static, and it's hard to deal with. So instead of dealing directly with the people that are involved, you deal with somebody else. Now, triangles are tough because people there's a lot of discussion, but the discussion doesn't extend to the people who are actually involved with each other. So you have third parties, you have other people involved, and you can't really talk out an issue. So the idea, and another thing, and we have, how many of you in the room are advisors? Just want to get a sense. So we got a lot of advisors. One of the challenges of an advisor is you are often in the position of being the head of the triangle. You get everybody talking to you. Now, and this can be a problem. Here's another example: a family where the father, everybody in the family worked in the business, and one day, the father came home and said, "Guess what, everybody? I've sold the business for $100 million. Isn't that great? We're rich." Now, a couple of things happened in the family. What would you say the family's reaction is to, let me say, 17 members of the family work in the family business. And they didn't know. And they haven't worked anywhere else. And a lot of them didn't go to college, but they went right into the business. What was the family's reaction to the father's gleeful say, we're rich? Yeah, it's like, what am I supposed to do now? I don't have a job. How can you took away my life? So, and the other thing, some smart family members pointed out, is they weren't rich. Father was rich. And they hadn't had any discussions. So what happened, and this is unfortunate, the father now had this big check, and he heard all the disappointment in the family, and he withdrew, and he started hanging out with his advisor. Now, the advisor was a brilliant young advisor, about the age of the two oldest sons. And he would spend all his time with the advisors talking about how to create a trust, how to create conditions in the trust, what kind of a trust. And I talked to the two sons, and I said, well, I haven't had dinner with my father. He doesn't play golf with me. And so the issue in the family is the father was working with the advisor to set up something fair for the family, rather than listening to the family. So these are the challenges, and when you're creating a family team, I think you don't have to, you can't unlearn these things, but you do have to address them, and you do have to bring them into the family. You can't create a family team cleanly without dealing with the family hierarchy, which long precedes the business hierarchy. So that's the challenge. And in the middle of the page, conflicts have to do with, again, your intention is not written on your chest. It's not written on your forehead. And you don't get points for it. When you have a good intention and you do something stupid, the reality is you did something stupid. And it's nice that you had a good intention, but if it's having the opposite effect, you have some responsibility. So the challenge is in a family, the older generation who are used to want to be seen as benevolent, they want the family to love them for what they've done, and they have to find that sometimes their intention and the effects are disconnected. So you have favoritism. So I faced that, in my family, and I didn't intend it, but you've got older sons, and you've got cute little daughters and cute little kids, and nasty old teenagers, and it's hard. So you're being valiant and trying, but favoritism is something that you see, and if you make the business into the prize, and if you say anything like the best person will be inheriting or running the business, you're setting yourself up. You can just imagine how that plays to the other people in the family and what that does. Sense of justice. Now, people talk about treating everyone equally, and there are actually tales that people tell. I have not met them, of family members where they have a book, and every time they give something to one kid, they write it in the book so that they can have everything be exactly perfect and they can divide up everything. But that doesn't deal with the fact that the kids are different and the kids are contributing differently. So the challenge in the families, if you try to make everything equal, the kids' reaction is, well, where you want to treat people fairly. And one of the most interesting discussions you can have in a family, and one of the most important ones, is how do we be fair to each other even though we're all different? What's fair in the family? And sometimes one family called it, what's the family deal? So I'm born in this family. What do I get for my good luck to do that independently of anything else that I do? What's the deal for being a family member, and then what's going to happen to the business? So family justice and family fairness is important. Scarcity. The idea that the resources are all in one place, and that somehow there's scarce resources. I think this again, we're in cliche territory here, but again, it's like people conceive what they feel is scarce is the love and the appreciation from their parents. What's not scarce is money. But what is true is that the one does not substitute for the other, but if you don't think you're going to get the one, it's like, well, I'll accept this. And so a lot of the conflict and difficulty in family has to do with the resources of family attention being misplaced. And this gives rise to jealousy and arguments and who's favorite child. Now the problem is that parents inadvertently, again, this is in the inadvertent, they make, for example, secret agreements. One family, one patriarch actually was making making a deal, and he wanted to get along with everybody, so he told everybody in the family that they were likely to be the successor, including his son-in-law. And it was like we would talk, when I was growing up, we talk about selling people the Brooklyn Bridge. It's like you could have a share of it, you could have a share of it. And he sold 1,000% of the Brooklyn Bridge to his family. Everybody was going to be the successor, and when they all got together, they had a problem. Old hurts and deprivation. I have a family story about my youngest son that absolutely blew me over. We were talking about inheritance, and my youngest son is a real millennial wise guy. And he said, we were talking about inheritance and setting up trusts and all that we all talk about. And he said, well, there's inheritance. I don't believe in it. Okay, you don't believe in it, so you're said, no, it's reparations. So again, it's like it wasn't gratitude for what he gets from the family. It's like we owe him because of what we did to him. Okay. So these are all the challenges, and I think when you're creating a family team, you have to acknowledge them. You can do it with humor, and I find humor is one of the great tools of doing it, is to say, this happened, and you can get mad at each other, or you can be mad and take it seriously, but also say, this is like what happens, and we're going to move on. So families, to create a family team in your family, you have to deal with the family hierarchy, with the family roles. You have to be honest about them. You have to be willing to listen and communicate directly, or you can't even get started. So it's kind of like the family has a whole era of unlearning before they can be learning how to be a good team. So all the things you said about great teams is really good, but if you're coming in there, loaded and armed to hunt bear, you can't create a team. You've got to work on that. Second challenge, and this is really interesting. I'm traveling now all over the world. I've been 20 countries, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years. And what's interesting to me is that every culture in the world, in the Asia, in South America, in Africa, Europe, there seems to be one personality type of a business owner. And if I'm talking to a Chinese patriarch, if I'm in Australia, if I'm here, there's enough in common that business owners recognize each other. And let me ask you from that, what are some of the characteristics? And let's be kind to each other. What are some of the characteristics of a business owner? And some of them are positive and negative, and some of them are positive in some places, and they have unintended consequences in other places. What are some of the characteristics? Let's hear from some of you. Business owners. Yep.
Risk taker.
Risk taker, right. And who do they listen to when they decide to take the risk? Who have they listened to before they take it?
Before they take it?
Yeah.
Probably the wife a lot of times, I would think, or the husband.
Oh.
I mean,
Who would say differently? What? What?
They listen to themselves.
Other business owners.
So they listen, but they're risk takers, and they tend to take the risks and feel real confident in them. What else? Stubborn, right?
and independent.
Stubborn and independent, which means what kind of listener are they? Poor listener.
Not the best.
What kind of how good are they at empowering other people? Not very. There's exceptions. We're dealing with a global archetype. But here you have the patriarch. The patriarch is a risk taker, is a person who's confident. This person has succeeded. This person knows he knows. And sometimes he says, well, I don't know how I know it, but I know that that's the thing to do. They make decisions. They're independent. They have a hard time being part of a team listening. For example, when I ask a patriarch to come to a family meeting, here's the hardest thing in the world. You ask a patriarch to come to a family meeting and to listen, to sit in the back of the room and listen, and you can't talk until the family's had a discussion. You listen to it, take notes, do what you want, but you can't talk. That is like torture. That's like waterboarding for a family business owner. So you ask them to do that, and they kick and scream, and they have a hard time. And then at the end of the thing, they're aghast. They kind of shift and go through all these different stages, and finally they open up and they start listening, and they say, "Oh God, what have I been missing?" So at the end, after everybody has spoken and that, then they get to come back, and it's usually not, you guys are all wrong. That was their first impulse, and the second impulse is to say, oh gods, I really have a lot that I need to hear and listen to. So the patriarch has a style. The patriarch has a style. They're used to doing it on their own. And in the family business, this gives rise to a particular challenge that I want to talk about, and that I've seen a lot, and it's hard to recognize. And the problem is paternalism. Who can say what paternalism is? Who can give me a definition? Yeah, here we go. What?
Control.
Control? What for and for whom?
The patriarch will typically control a decision for somebody else.
Why?
because they're doing the best that they know how to do.
And they don't think the person that they're making the decision for can do it themselves, right? And because they're so benevolent and they're really, putting themselves out, what do they expect from the person that they make the decisions for? Gratitude. Oh, thank you, Dad, for running my life. Thank you for telling me what I should do. So this is the problem of paternalism. Now, you got a 6-year-old kid, and he wants to cross the street or drive a car or whatever it is. Paternalism is perfectly appropriate. Now, let me have you think about something. In a family, how do you, what's the statute of limitations? At what time do you look at your kids and say, okay, I've been making decisions for you for how many years, and now, congratulations, I'm stopping. Has anybody, what? When you die. Yeah, that right. I mean, that's what people.
Out how to do what you reach beyond back.
Yeah.
Back from the grave and straight.
People, well, the trust does that.
But that's simply because you're a parent.
Well, so you're a certain kind of parent. You're a parent that believes that paternalism is the best way to raise somebody. Now, this is very interesting. So, you are making decisions for your kids. You want to do that for the rest of your life. When your kid is 45, has a wife, 3 kids, things like that, what kind of a relationship do you expect to have with them? I'm putting you on the spot, but let's just dialogue. So what does that do to your 45-year-old married?
Well, if you try that, it's not going to be worth a shit.
There you. Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Pardon my French, but so you better learn that when your son or daughter gets married, the best thing to do is to go to Texas if you're living in Maine and leave them alone until they figure out how they're going to live and stay out of their life.
And that is the consequence of paternalism. First of all, it doesn't expire. Now I've actually worked with some families where they have, for example, one family. I was at a family retreat at a ranch out in north somewhere, a beautiful ranch, and this was a ceremony where they invite people when they reach the point of 18 into the family's governance structure. And they have, people come on horseback from the 7 branches of the family. They all have torches, and they greet the person. And it's a whole ritual. And basically what they're saying is now you are a citizen of the family. You are entitled to information. You have a vote in family matters, not in the business, but in family matters. And you're part of the council. You could be on the council, attend meetings, things like that. So there's a way of doing that. And I think families don't know how to kind of stop paternalism, or they inadvertently keep it going. Like a lot of families, for example, have the making decisions for extends when the young people are in the business, and extends through trusts and things like that, where they never feel like there's a sense of responsibility. So here's something that happened. So I was working with a patriarch, and he was, 87, coming into work every day. Hadn't named a successor. His young children were in their late 40s, all in different roles in the business, some very competent, wonderful people. And he said, well, so when are you going to name a successor? When I see that they're ready. Oh, okay, so I said, so now tell me exactly, if I'm one of your sons, tell me what I would be doing if I was ready. And he said, well, you'd be taking initiative, and you'd be setting up your own projects, and you'd be taking responsibility for a business unit, and blah, 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 blah. Say, so how come you're not seeing that? And this was luckily, in this case, a light bulb went off, and what he saw is that by being so controlling and paternalistic, he was in effect having the opposite result. He was allowing and suggesting to not allowing his sons and daughters to and in-laws and everything to have any authority. So of course they couldn't demonstrate leadership because they weren't given the opportunity. So the challenge for paternalism is to say, how do you begin to get out of it? How do you begin to step back and let go? And I would say that the building a team in the next generation, there's some way in which the older generation has to let go. So the other thing, another thing about paternalism that's interesting is that a lot of the things that business owners do, they don't really know it, but what they're doing is paternalistic, and it's their behavior that's making it worse. And so, for example, the two of the most common questions that I get as an advisor, and every advisor will get those, is one, can you do an assessment of all my kids and tell me which kid should take over the business? And, the second is, how much money should I give them and when? What do you say to that? I mean, what are some of the assumptions that a person is making by asking that question? Tell me who should take over the business.
Well, they're children. It looks like they could see who's the most natural leader.
Right, you should be able to see. Now, yeah, so there should be something, there's a little spark inside them that I'm going to kind of tease out with a little magical psychological test.
They actually have to address the fact that they're not going to be the patriarch anymore.
Right. So it's a challenge, and my response to that, to those questions, how to do it, is like, well, tell me, what kind of conversations have you had with them about this? And to me, it's like you can do assessments. Assessments are wonderful when they're used for learning. They're terrible when they're used for predicting future behavior. And so if you want to say, well, let's do an assessment about learning, but I always say, and let's assess everybody and look around the room, and that means you also. So you can do wonderful assessments, but they have to be everybody, and we do what we call 360 assessments, where everybody basically reacts to different qualities. So you have not just how you asking a leader to assess their leadership by just asking them how they perceive themselves. That's a pretty interesting way to assess leadership. To say, how good a leader are you? Because all of the data shows that a leader, a good leader, will score themselves lower on how good a leader they are than a bad leader that's totally clueless. So the challenge in a family is to create engagement. If you want to create a team in the next generation, and you're saying who should run the business, I can't think of a reason not to have a discussion and say, let's get the family together and talk about the future of the business. What would be, what would be the reason not to do that? What would be a good, are there anybody think of a good reason not to have a discussion, non-binding, not a decision-making meeting, not one person, one vote, but a discussion? Is there any downside to that? Yeah, sorry, yes.
I think just conflict avoidance, I think, is maternal mothers and fathers both who are leading companies. If you're a woman-owned business or you don't want to create conflict with your children that potentially are going to be your successors, or between the children themselves.
So this is it. So conflict avoidance. If you avoid a conflict, does it, and then you bring it up and you talk about it, did it not exist before? So this is,
if I don't talk about it,
it's not there, and it may even go away. And what's happening is you've got issues that build up, and what happens is it's like a volcano. It's like the pressure builds up, the more you don't speak about it. So if people are mad at something and heard about something in the business, and you don't talk about it for 20 years, it's not the same hurt, and it's not less. It's like it builds up, and it can color everything. So the way to begin to shift and the team building and building a next generation team in the family is it means a shift of mindset. And you can see in the notes from the paternalistic idea that I make decisions and you don't. And the young people are supposed to be passive and just accept what I do, improvised, making decisions, closed, not sharing information. That's another part of it, is when they're the successors, they can learn about the business, but now they can't. And it's not about young people in the next generation. They don't need to know every penny and everything about, what they need to know is how it's organized and the general format. And a lot of families have trusts, and they have a meeting every year where they give out all the trust data and in these reams and reams of spreadsheets and things like that, and they have the meeting and nobody has any questions because nobody is really interested. But then you talk about, here's our business, and here's the values that we have, and here's the intention, and here's the mission, and here's how we do it, and people wake up. So the idea is that paternalism creates passivity in the next generation. If someone has made a decision for you, why should you question it? Why should you challenge it? And so one of the things that happens in some families is the people that are capable and talented, as you said, they go 3,000 miles away, and they're real successful. And the people that hang around in this paternalistic environment and wait are generally either the less capable, or they're certainly not developing and growing and building skills. Yep.
When you talk about who's going to be the next leader of a company, next generation, should that decision be made? Maybe not all the family members work in the business.
Yeah.
Should it be made with those working in the business? And how much say should the rest of the family have? I would think there's a real division there.
There is, and this is a very important concept in the family.
Yeah.
So, of course, so we had mother before. She's not a family, she's not in the business. She's an owner, maybe, and things like. But so the question is, everybody in the family has opinions. Yeah. And so in the family, it's very important for people to learn the difference between sharing opinions in an advisory way versus making business decisions. So, for example, I'm working with a family that's selecting, it's like 30 or 40 years, they have a giant family office and all kinds of entities, and they're selecting a new chief investment officer. It's a big deal because the last one was a family member who's retiring, things like that. So now, and there's 80 or so family members in 3 different generations. So the question is, you look at what this person is investing money. So family members are concerned about impact investing and the values of the investment. They're not investment professionals. But they want a family office leader who listens to family members, who has good skills. So the family has defined some things, and they have a say, and they're interviewing some of the finalists for the candidates, but they're not decision makers. And in the family, this is something that happens. There are people that should be heard, but they're not the decision makers. And what they're doing is family members are making recommendations, but there is a board investment committee of the family, the professionals. Some are non-family members. They're not even owners. They're professionals, and that group is going to make the decision. But there's going to be a give and take. So that's the way that rather than paternalism, where you would say it's none of your business, none of you are professionals, and the family, 80-something family member who is retiring, his first proposal was that he would name the successor. This was not a popular thing, and again, he's come around and learned, but there's a whole process, and rather than a way of doing it. And the other thing, and this is another thing about family business founders, they are single people. So if you founded a business and you think about leadership, what's the picture in your mind? Right. And it's a person. When you look at the next generation, and this is a thing, and you look at a family, let's say the family has a business and they have a foundation and they have investments and the business has 2 or 3 divisions and they have a venture capital arm or a family bank. The idea of leadership is something that the family has a governance, and so the family has leadership. And the idea is that the family needs a cadre of leaders, not a leader, and if the patriarch is looking towards one leader, that's not the way it is. The family needs to develop a group of leaders, and they may even switch roles sometimes. They may even take on roles. And so the next generation. So the model that we have is that the next generation is working as a partnership. And what I'm suggesting in this discussion of paternalism is great, but it's not the preferred style of the next generation. The next generation, if you ask them, which too few people do, they would say, well, what we want to do is listen to each other. We want to make decisions together. We understand that we're not experts on everything, but we do want to weigh in on things. We want to we know some of the things, and we have several leaders to select, not one. And for example, a large family gets to a certain size, they have a family leader who is in charge of family matters, family education, family development, and they have a business leader. Sometimes there's a philanthropy leader. Sometimes their business is divided. So there are several leaders. So the challenge is to begin to develop and have an exchange in the family where you're not just selecting the successor, but you're challenging the discourse of the older generation by saying we have a different way of doing it. Rather than select the business leader, what we're doing is we're creating a team of people, and we're going to work together and look into future leadership. Because a number of families, for example, moving into the second, third, fourth generation, decide that the family members are owners, so they have to learn how to be responsible owners, but they decide that, none of us have the skills to run the business, and we want to have a non-family CEO. And by the third generation, fourth generation, if the family is still together, the chances are they will have a family leadership at the board level, but they are very, very likely to have a non-family leader. Yeah.
May I just interrupt?
Oh, please, yeah.
Folks, I just want to let us know that we are going to have a short little break.
Okay.
15-minute break. Is this a good time to?
Yes. Let me do 2 more minutes, and then we'll break, and then we'll come back and we'll do a dialogue, and then we'll have another discussion. So the challenge for the next generation of the family is to create in the second generation team, is to create a new mindset, is to start with awareness of the family hierarchy, to begin to challenge it, to understand that it's been a wonderful ride, and to really respect the older generation for what they've done, but to say that now the next generation, as we said right at the beginning, the next generation has some different ideas. And part of it is they want to move from one person being paternalistic and making decisions for everybody, to everybody making decisions together in a collaborative way. That is a culture change. And the family has to recognize that they're making a culture change and begin to set up a process for the family members to talk to each other, to exchange, and to work together, and not initially thinking about who's going to take over, who's going to be the leader, not that focused, but really what is our vision for the next generation? What do we want to see? Do we want to be partners? I think the second, third generation have to look at each other and say, you know, it was nice to grow up with you at times, but you know, like the idea that the six of us are going to be partners for the rest of our lives is just absolutely inconceivable to me. I want out. I'm moving to France, and you know, I want to do something else. So the next generation has to decide whether they want to be a team, and then who's on it, and then what they want to do, and how they're going to do it. And that's a culture shift for the family. So let's think about that. We'll take a 15-minute break and come back, and we'll have another dialogue, and then we'll talk some about the makeup of teams.
Thank